Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners! The Sounders rule the region! Seattle Sounders is campeón! All creatures great and small.
Rothrock going to collect it. He does just about. Runs into the advertising awning. Low to our left. Ball goes in. Oh, what a cross! And what a goal!
Where's my copy?
I got a bunch of them in the car. I'll get you some.
You're handing them out for free already.
How many cost them? $50.
I'll Venmo you.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. I am Jeremiah O'Shan, and joining me today, someone I am really excited to have on the podcast, Chris Daniels. You know him from Cairo. You know him from your TV, from everywhere these days. Chris, it is my pleasure to have you on. Welcome to the show for the first time.
Jeremiah, you know this. I've told you to your face. I'm a big fan of what you built with the rise of the Sounders, and have read your work for years. So I'm honored to be with you. And I've worked at 3 of the 4 TV stations in town now. So I've almost hit for the cycle, or touched all 4 corners, or gone end to end, or whatever sports analogy you want to use.
And you left, and most recently you left the market and came back, right?
Yeah, when I left King in 2022, I went to Spotlight on America, which is our company's flagship investigative franchise. Did that exclusively for 6 months, and still do it on a monthly basis, in addition to the things I do locally for KOMO.
KOMO, I blew it. I absolutely blew it, and I knew I was going to do that, and I apologize. So, mea culpa.
It's okay. You got the one station I haven't worked at.
Oh, you did. Killing me. We'll fix it in post. No,
okay.
we won't. I'm going to own that. God, I am embarrassed. Thank you for calling me out on it, though, in all seriousness. But this illustrates how of a robust of a resume you have, that I'm getting confused. So confused that I thought you worked everywhere and nowhere at once, apparently. Anyway, the main reason I wanted to have you on is I have really enjoyed the coverage that you were doing of the World Cup. You also wrote a really interesting piece about the state of the Seahawks sale and how it impacts the Sounders. I think you're really well positioned to answer some questions that I think a lot of Sounders fans are interested in. But let's start with the World Cup. This was, look, I've said this before, I'll say it again. I was really skeptical of the World Cup. I just thought it was going to fall flat on its face. I thought these projections that it was going to be like 6 Super Bowls were totally crazy. I thought the projections of 750,000 people coming to Seattle were just like numbers plucked out of the air. And I was telling everyone that would listen, look, if you really want to go, just hold off on buying tickets, because they're going to be giving these things away at some point. And boy, was I wrong.
I agree with everything you just said. I mean, I thought for sure we were going to see 40,000 people at a few of those games, especially the Iran-Egypt game on Pride Night. I didn't think that would be a full house. The Bosnia-Herzegovina match.
That was the one that I thought was going to just be a dog.
I thought that it would be half full. And I told people in advance, I was really worried about half empty stadiums, especially in Seattle. And the only match that was not technically a sellout was that first one. And that was only a couple hundred shy, right? And we're going off FIFA numbers there when they say something sold out or not. But you and I both know from being in the stadium, I think those were full stadiums. I think every game was a sellout, and I don't know what ultimately happened on the secondary market. We got closer and closer to match time on those 6 events, but especially the last one in the knockout round, I didn't see any drop off in the ticket sale price. I thought I'd see something similar in Vancouver. I went to one of the matches up there, which was Egypt's first ever win in the World Cup against New Zealand. That was a sellout. 80% of the fans there, Egyptian, had clearly traveled from elsewhere, from outside North America. It was a phenomenal scene, and a phenomenal scene afterwards outside in the streets of Vancouver with the cheering and the dancing and Mo Salah on the back of another player I think what I saw in Vancouver and primarily in Seattle was unlike anything I've seen before. Fans that I talked to said they'd been to NFC Championship games, they'd been to other major championships for the Sounders, MLS Cup, Leagues Cup. Never saw anything like that. Thought it was better than the parade. The traffic that we saw in terms of sound transit was better than we saw for the Seahawks parade. So, yeah, I think there's some recency bias, and a lot of people have that right now based on how well the event went. But I think that the thought was there were going to be complaints about attendance, going to be complaints about congestion, people getting to the stadium, getting in and out of the stadium, parking, security. We didn't hear any of those complaints, and I think that's what also surprises me after the event is the lack of real complaints and the fact that there was so much civic pride and civic joy about how well it went. And I say that objectively, being all over the city and walking with the American Outlaws. And, I at one point, Jeremiah, when I was covering it live and streaming it live, the march to the match on that knockout round on July 6th, I stopped a couple of times and I said, just soak this up to myself. I don't know if there's another event in recent Seattle history where you can think that everybody was on the same page and happy and wanting to talk and waving the American flag and the amount of American flags and the chants and hitting the beach ball around. And, there was just no comparable march like that. And I think I even said on the air, I'm just going to get out of the way, and a good producer just gets out of the way and lets the pictures and the sounds tell the story, because it was unlike anything that I can remember in Seattle.
Yeah, I had the same reaction, and I come to this from I don't know if I was cynical about it or what. I thought I was coming at it from just an open eye. Like, I've seen big crowds before. I've seen, I was at I went to the Seahawks parade. I've been to Leagues Cup final. I've been to the Champions League final. I've seen the Sounders host MLS Cup. And I thought I was ready sort of for what I was going to experience. And especially that Belgium game, that parade, that 25, they estimated it's like 25,000 people.
Yeah.
Which I thought was part of what was so amazing about that was I had gone into the stadium already at that point, and I wanted to just sort of get a sense of the vibe in the stadium. And it was already packed. Like, the concourses were teeming with people. And so that there was a 25,000 person march, to me, suggests that it sort of illustrated there's a lot of people who just want a piece of this action. They just want to feel involved. They don't care if they have a ticket. And I guess some of the estimates are that there was somewhere between 750,000 to 1 million people downtown on that during the day, which is, I believe, just because I saw every single bar in like a 3-mile radius of Lumen Field, just like overflowing with people. It was just like this massive humanity, and everyone seemed, and I think to your point, it wasn't like anyone, it just smiles and unironic flag waving and people that were just sort of happy to be in each other's company. And you saw that over and over again, really. I mean, the US Belgium match was the most extreme example, but it was the Bosnia Qatar match. It was the Egypt Iran. It was Egypt Belgium. It was Belgium Senegal. You know, no matter which game you were at, you saw versions of the same thing. And I don't think I was ready for any of it. I don't think I was ready for sort of like, and I kind of thought there would be a decent crowd of Seattleites who came out to the game just because it's a big event going on. But this was clearly something else.
It was different, and stories about Pacific Place having a line out the door for the Seattle Soccer House, and that hasn't happened in at least a decade where there's been that kind of crowds in Pacific Place. I can tell you a couple anecdotes. I was in the march. I was in the march and ran into an older woman from Issaquah who told me she didn't have tickets to the game, but she wanted to be a part of it. She came down, marched in the match, said, I think that there's outside noise that Seattle gets. And she said this was just this amazing moment in time where everybody is on the same page and the city was shining, 80-degree day. And she was saying, I just think this shows the rest of the country and the rest of the world what kind of city Seattle is. And I also think to that Qatar match, which was one that I thought would not have high attendance, walking around Pioneer Square and seeing people who clearly had come to the U.S. for that game, who were wearing, I think the gowns, the gear that you would see in the Middle East, for lack of a better description, posing with Seattle police officers, posing with Bosnian fans. It was this great cultural exchange in the streets of Seattle, and nobody was upset, and nobody was talking back and forth or hurling insults back and forth, and everybody was happy. It's I just think it was there were a couple of times there were kind of pinch me moments even covering it to see that unfolding in such a positive way, given everything that we discussed in advance that could happen. It didn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, there was, and I think a lot of the skepticism I think was warranted. Like look, I don't think anyone was stoked about paying the prices that they had to pay. There were challenges for people. There were real challenges for people to get into the country. You know, we could go and litigate all of that. But I think what was amazing is that it sort of all washed away and that it was able to be overcome. And again, to your point, again, after the game, after every single game, I think I walked out into Pioneer Square and fans from both teams were partying together. Like they were playing music, they were dancing, they were drinking, they were celebrating. And it didn't matter, like you said, it didn't really matter if they won or lost. It was sort of just, we're here for a good time. And they were intent on doing that. And it was great to see. And, I'm curious though, from your perspective, do you think this has any, like, what are the legs from this? Like, it's all fine and good that Seattle had a really great 3-week run during the World Cup. And I think those of us who are sort of civic boosters that love Seattle are inclined to say, yep, this is what it can be every day. But like, that's probably a little Pollyanna-ish. What do you think? Like, what realistically are the legs? What do you think the lessons that we can take from this sort of experience are?
I think Beth Knox from the Seattle Sports Commission has a huge feather in her cap to go out and sell the city and try to, in a bid process, get Seattle as a host for the 2031 Women's World Cup. I think what you heard on outside the city is that Seattle showed itself very well in that environment. And I think we saw people from outside Seattle say the city should have been the host for the World Cup final or a semifinal. I think,
why not?
I think that now becomes a reality with the Women's World Cup because of how the city performed, how people were able to get around, how people were able to. I mean, I had skepticism about that pedestrian zone in Pioneer Square, but there was a reason now I think as we saw it play out, why they had it that way with the northern entry and being really the only way for most fans to get in. That worked out extremely well. Sound Transit had its biggest ridership days ever, showing that people could get back and forth across the lake too. So I think all of that helps in a bid process. I think that in terms of safety and security, I found it more overwhelming during the Club World Cup with the amount of security that was outside
that's a
the
great
stadium.
point.
This kind of blended into the background. There were some issues, I think, on the first match with people getting into the stadium and some pinch points around King and Occidental. That got sorted out by the second match. But I think there were some lessons learned there for just safety and security, staging multiple events. For Beth Knox, who's been trying to get the NFL draft, she just showed how the waterfront could work with that, with the barge out front, with the natural amphitheater that the new aquarium provides, with the Overlook Walk. All those pictures with the skyline and people hanging out on the Overlook Walk, looking down at a stage. That's all built for the NFL draft. I think she now has those pictures to prove it. I think for the police department, they were able to prove themselves in crowd management and working with outside agencies. I think it helps for recruiting for the police department to have such a positive event and have positive feedback face to face. I mean, I could go on. I just think that this could not have gone better for the city of Seattle. The one exception, if I really wanted to dig down and find one, is the Chinatown International District. We did hear complaints that they didn't feel the bump that perhaps other parts of the city did, and some of that has to deal with just foot traffic flow and people getting off at the Sound Transit stop and walking towards the stadium. But that would be the one thing I think we heard any criticism about were voices in the CID saying, "Hey, we would have liked to have had a little bit more a piece of this big pie." And hotels too. If there was some grumbling, we heard from hotels that they didn't get the big bump during the week of a couple of matches that they thought, but Airbnbs did well. So I mean, there are lessons that people will learn coming out of this event, both in recruitment and ways that perhaps the next big event could be handled. But Peter, you heard it as well as I did. 6 Super Bowls, and it's going to be the biggest thing since the 62 World's Fair. I didn't believe him at first, but I think as time goes on and we see in the next couple of years what may come out of this with getting other events, he could be proven to be accurate on some of the early comments.
Sounder at Heart has been around in one form or another since 2009. In 2026, though, we make a pretty significant evolution when we go analog. Yes, that's right, in the year of our Lord 2026, we are publishing a real-life magazine. We're calling this thing 4, as in Sounder at Heart 4.0, but we're stylizing it as IV because we absolutely love Roman numeral. And if you want to refer to it as IV, that's cool too. The first issue has a comic book style cover that was hand-drawn by local artist Kevin Newber. Features by Tim Foss, Susie Rance, and Charlie Boehm, a statistical deep dive by Kat Bush, a Q&A with Brian Schmetzer, a column by G. Willow Wilson, and photographs by Noah Reif, Max Aquino, Mike Russell, and Jane Dershowitz. I could not possibly be more proud of the work everyone put into making this, and I think you're going to absolutely love it. If you'd like to get your hands on one of these limited edition copies, we're currently selling them for $15 on our website. Get yours now.
Yeah, Peter Tomazawa is who you're referring to, and he was the head of the local organizing committee. And I mean, look, I'll be honest, I took a lot of shots at the local organizing committee in the build up to this, in part because I just thought they were writing checks that they just were not going to be able to cash. And lo and behold, it came off really well. I have no real complaints. And I'm very happy to be, this is one of those things I'm really excited to be wrong about. But one of the things that I do think came across, and we sort of alluded to a lot here, is just how the downtown location of the stadium is really what differentiated it from everywhere, but maybe Vancouver, which has a sort of similar arrangement in terms of where the stadium is. But I will note that one of the big differences between, at least and I'm curious, you went to Vancouver. I did not go to Vancouver, but I know that Hastings Park was was where the sort of fan fest was. And was there, my assumption is that the activity right around the stadium was not quite as robust and as organic as it was in Seattle. I don't know if you want to
Yeah,
weigh in on that.
I will tell you that, I think Seattle had a better layout. In Vancouver, the East Hastings, what's like their Puyallup Fairgrounds with their old Canucks arena, is where they hosted that. And, that's not downtown. That's you're going through a sketchier part of Vancouver to get there, and you're going by bus or taxi, or you're parking, or you're going
not connected
off
by the SkyTrain.
Not connected by the SkyTrain. You're going off Highway 1, their one freeway around the east side of the city. So it was a little bit disconnected, and I know there was some criticism in Vancouver that they didn't have it down on either waterfront, Jack Poole Plaza or the other big park where they had a bunch of the Olympic stuff. So they took a chance there. I know that on Sunday with the World Cup final, they did sell out that park, and there were long lines to get in there. But outside the stadium, the kind of entry point was more on the False Creek side, and they didn't have the same amount of activity in terms of tents and places to get your Bank of America bracelet and any sort of TV studio set or anything like that. So it was kind of, I thought, in a way, some wasted space, but they were also using that for ingress and egress. And then, downtown in Yaletown, I think we're vibrant. I think Yaletown, there's probably some businesses there who had some record foot traffic in that month, and probably would have done even better if Canada had actually beat Switzerland. Because I did hear from anecdotally from the Yaletown brewing company there that they had one of their best days ever when Canada was playing right down the street. So I think they lost somewhat by Switzerland advancing out of the group stage. But it was still, I think, for those Yaletown businesses, for a lot of those downtown businesses, I walked through on Sunday from Yaletown during the World Cup final, from Yaletown back through the city core, and it was phenomenal. Granville was blocked off as a big pedestrian plaza with people standing in the road watching on every TV they could possibly see, and every bar, and I think there was a lot of activation there, and just people spilled out into the streets to experience that World Cup final as well. So in the discussions I had during a couple of trips to Vancouver during the World Cup, everybody was pretty happy for the most part.
Oh, that's great.
But I don't know exactly how that whole component on the east side of the city worked.
Well, I bring it up in part because one of the topics of conversation has turned into, the Sounders have not really shouted this from the rooftops, but they have made it very obvious to anyone who is paying attention that they have designs on building a stadium in Renton, and that would be a very different experience than what we had at Lumen Field. And I don't know if you've gotten any sense of this. I know I haven't gotten any sense of it, but I just have to believe that this whole thing does open some eyes and maybe change some perspectives on the value, on the inherent value of just having a downtown stadium, and that, whatever extra revenue streams you might be able to bring up from Renton, that there is some kind of soul that gets lost when you leave a downtown location like Lumen Field.
Yes, and yes. I mean, I think one of the reasons why it was so successful is because it was downtown, and if you're the Sounders, you're now having some second thoughts about any sort of grand plans in Renton. I mean, the idea that all of these fans would magically, not only, not all of them are necessarily Sounders fans that came to the World Cup, but part of the appeal of the Sounders out of the gate in 2009, and the reason why they were getting 40,000 fans a game, was because it was downtown, and because people could take transit into downtown or go to a bar or restaurant a couple of hours in advance and walk to the match. You don't have that in Renton. And especially if we're talking about the area near the old Longacre site where they've set up camp for what it turned out to be a beautiful facility, as a training facility. But there's this component of heavy rail it's not Sound Transit that's directly connected to that site. If that's where they want to discuss building any sort of soccer specific stadium, it's heavy rail that only goes through that area a couple of times a day on weekdays, and not necessarily has the same service on weekends. And that's been casually mentioned in these discussions about building a stadium there is the connection to transit. It's not the same thing, and you wouldn't have what we saw here with the World Cup, with people showing up a few hours before match time, and the march to the match wouldn't be the same, and the march to the match from the waterfront wouldn't be the same. I think that for the long-term success of the Sounders, there has to be another idea besides building in Renton. They had an opportunity before Memorial Stadium. It's in the process of renovation, as you know. There was an opening there at one point in time, potentially for them to have a 25 to 30,000 seat stadium. Obviously, is not happening. Where else could you build that without having it so far removed in Renton, making it tougher for fans to get there and tougher for fans to want to get there? Part of the success with the World Cup and with the Sounders to this point has been that location.
Yeah.
And I think it was just reinforced during the World Cup.
It was. And I guess related to that, one of the biggest, maybe the biggest sports story in Seattle outside of the actual Super Bowl and the actual World Cup, but the non-sporting, biggest non-on-field story around Seattle has been the sale of the Seahawks. And you have covered that pretty extensively.
Yep.
One of the tangents of that story, though, is in addition to the Allen estate selling the Seahawks, they also have a 25% stake in the Sounders. That's gone from, my understanding is that they didn't actually put up money to get that 25% stake. They basically invested it. They ran the business operations for the Sounders for the first, I think, 5 seasons. But anyway, that investment has now turned into whatever, 200 million, 250 million, something like that valuation. I know you wrote a story about the state of that sale and that it was not included in the Seahawks sale, but what have you learned about that? Because it suddenly has a lot of relevance, I think, right now, because it would seem on paper, at least to someone like me, that if the Seahawks were to buy the stake in the Sounders and then they wanted to sort of take control of the Sounders, that would suddenly create a lot of synergy at Lumen Field and keep them there. But anyway, what do you know about it?
I agree. I mean, I think there was a kind of an assumption, and that's why I made a couple of phone calls that the Sounders were, that 25% stake was part of the Seahawks deal, when in fact it's not. So that piece of the Allen sports portfolio is still out there, and what that sale would mean, what it could mean for any sort of new stadium redevelopment, any sort of grand plans for the Sounders, that's all a question for another day. But, with the Seahawks in the short term, that deal's likely going to be approved in August. There'll be new owners. There'll be new owners who just spent a lot of money.
Almost $10 billion, which is almost an insane amount of money.
Record NFL total. 9.6 billion. The closest was, just a few years ago with the Washington Commanders at 6 billion. So they're coming in with a lot of money. What are they going to want with Lumen Field? With a lease that's up in a little over 5 years, are they going to ask for something from the city and the county and the state, knowing that there are some renewals, but they could potentially say, hey, we're going to opt out because we want X, Y, and Z. Again, that's all hypothetical. But if they do say, hey, we want to have natural grass in there, or we want to have more control over something, how does that affect the Sounders? These are questions I don't necessarily have the answers to right now. But another component of this is, will they want to acquire some other real estate to maximize the return on their investment? Could they potentially want to build an entertainment district? Could they want to potentially do something with the convention center on the south side of the stadium that's been there forever to maximize that? How would that affect the Sounders? I think there are some interconnected parts here that we just don't have the answers to right now, because the Coastal family has said they're not going to talk about this until the deal is actually closed, presumably next month.
And so because they have not talked like publicly at all, right?
No. And they are rejecting, as far as I know, what I've been told directly, and I think what others have reported, they're rejecting any sort of interviews until the deal is finalized by the NFL, which to a certain point is understandable. But until we get to that point, we're not going to know the motivations, what they think about sharing the building in some way with the Sounders, if they have other plans for Lumen Field, if they have plans for an entertainment district. But we can just, I can just say this, that there are 8 different teams in the NFL, quarter of the league, that's in the process of building a new stadium, opening a new stadium, or trying to finance a new stadium. The Bears are the ones that are getting a lot of attention right now, but there's already dominoes that have fallen with Buffalo is opening a new stadium this year for the Bills. Tennessee is opening a new dome stadium, and they're getting a Super Bowl out of it. DC is getting a new dome stadium. A lot of these NFL teams, Cleveland is getting a new dome stadium. They want dome stadiums because they want to maximize the revenue and have events there year round. So when you spend $9.6 billion, how are you going to get a return on your investment sooner rather than later? It's by trying to get more events and trying to potentially build your footprint around the stadium. And you and I both know there's not a huge footprint around Lumen Field.
No.
And so there's some questions on how all of that may work. But the Sounders are, I think, in this conversation, connected to all that.
Yeah, you know, because I would just think, look, between the Sounders and Reign, they had something like 40 events at Lumen Field last year. You would think that those 40 events are a valuable asset to whoever is running first and goal, i.e. the Seahawks. Do we know if is the convention center part of first and goal, or is that somehow a separate entity?
I believe it is, and here's one of the moving parts on all of this is the WAMU Theater that is within the convention center that is not named after Washington Mutual anymore, but it's still called the WAMU Theater. I think at best just a serviceable venue, and it's in a big concrete building.
Lots of negative things about it.
And the Mariners have as kind of a apples to apples comparison here. You know, they went to the county and did get more public tax money before the pandemic to do some renovations on the stadium. They've now signed long-term leases, the old Pyramid space, Victory Hall, where we saw all these events for the World Cup. They're now signed up with Live Nation to build a live concert venue right on that site as well, 5,000 seats or so, which is going to take business away from the WAMU Theater in theory. The same kind of concerts and events.
I mean, almost exactly the same size, right?
Yeah, same size. There's a question on car shows and boat shows and that kind of thing where you would put those, but they're going to lose business, hypothetically, from the Mariners for doing what I think an NFL team wants to do, which is build out an entertainment district that is around year-round, that has foot traffic year-round. You know, the Mariners still have space to build a hotel across the street. So, I mean, they are doing what I think a lot of teams want to do, which is try to maximize revenue in their local kind of stadium area. And that's going to be one of the questions for the Seahawks and for the Sounders, I think, going forward.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, like, I don't know, one of the things I fell in love with during the event days was just the way that Occidental was sort of pedestrianized all the way to whatever, the sunken ship parking lot, whatever. And it was like, I've always thought that was a great opportunity, at least on event days. And I realize event days are not all the same. You know, WAMU Theater concert does not bring in 60,000 people, but I don't know. There's a lot of potential down there for, even as crowded as it is. It seems like it's a vibrant space. And I really do hope the Sounders continue to be part of it for a long, long time, because it's just hard for me to imagine a better spot. Like, I mean, I understand as much as anyone that the limitations of Lumen Field for a team like the Sounders and for the Reign, but man, it's the upside there just seems so extreme.
I don't know why the Sounders haven't called up Chris Hansen and said, hey, you got some space here. They built an arena down at Seattle Center. Any interest in building a soccer specific
Yeah.
stadium. I'm surprised that conversation hasn't happened, at least that I know of. But
I
that
don't think you're
would
wrong.
feed into this whole idea of having something that is 20 dates a year and feeding off the district and the stadium district as it exists right now. I think I'm hard pressed to think of another space somewhere in the region where the Sounders could get the same kind of vibe that they get on match day right now, and that we also saw at the World Cup.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Chris, I've taken up enough of your time. I want to give you another shout out, though. Obviously, KOMO News on a nightly basis. You're doing
Pretty much.
KOMO?
Pretty much. I juggle a lot of balls or put on a lot of hats. Yeah.
And then you have a podcast that is also it's on television as well, right? Inside the Arena.
Inside the Arena, it's our little engine that we started more than 110 weeks ago. I've forgotten on a week-to-week basis how many we've recorded, but it's been on a weekly basis. We haven't missed a week. And it is not only on your favorite audio platform, it's on YouTube and is on TV. And during the non-football time of the year, meaning the non-college and NFL time of the year, it is on the CW, our sister station, and airs on weekends periodically on KOMO. Then during college football season, it's on immediately following a lot of those big games. So it's kind of turned into a vlog, pod, TV show, whatever you want to call it. But
we're blurring the lines of these days.
Yes, we touch all the
obviously.
bases.
Yeah, and it's and in case people don't know, it is essentially dealing with the story outside the lines of the field. Essentially, it's the business side, it's the stuff that's going on off the field, but it is sports focused.
Yeah, business and philanthropic. My good friend Nico Tamurian, the sports director at KOMO, he's at a lot of the games. I tend to stay outside the games and talk to the business and philanthropic leaders, and so it's this great marriage with the two of us. And I always repeat every week: off the ice, off the court, off the field of play. That's kind of what we focus on. And the business side of sports, the story about the potential return of the Supersonics, the Sounders in Renton, stadium issues. That's all kind of in my purview, and is kind of that intersection for me and what I do at KOMO and what I do otherwise.
Well, Chris, I know I blew past the self-imposed deadline I put on this, but I appreciate you being such a good sport.
Yeah.
And it was great having you on. One of these days, we're gonna have to get you out to our studio and show that off. Even though I don't know how impressed you'll be. It's probably not much what you're used to, but it's we like to show it off when we can. But Chris, thank you so much for doing this. You're of course also on Blue Sky. You're on Twitter, and I just want to say thank you for being on Blue Sky, because there's not a lot of people in sort of like the mainstream press that are even on there still, and I appreciate that you are. So
I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Threads. I'm on X. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn.
Look at that.
How many different social media platforms do I have to be on? But I am. And once Blue Sky figures out that TweetDeck kind of platform, or somebody can teach me about it, then I'll be on it a lot more.
Well, I might have some off-air suggestions for you then.
Okay.
But thank you for doing this, Chris. Let's get out of here. I am Jeremiah Shan. This is No Sadietes, part of the Sounder Heart Podcast Network, and we will catch you next time.
Let's go Sounders. Yeah.